On a bright summer morning outside the city of Denver, the forest glowed under gold-washed light as cicadas hummed like distant violins. But the peace cracked the moment a 7-year-old girl in a pastel pink jacket stepped beyond the tree line, and beside her, two German shepherds moved like twin shadows carved from sunlight and instinct. Locals who spotted them whispered the same legend. Emma Miller, the brave little girl with oversized brown boots, and Max and Rex, two strange shepherds whose sharp amber eyes seemed to sense danger long before it arrived. Some said the dogs didn't just react, they anticipated. Then both dogs froze. A deep growl trembled through the summer air. Emma clutched her pink jacket tighter. Because just ahead, glowing in a beam of sunlight, lay a scorched circle of grass and a bent piece of aircraft metal. The first clue tied to a passenger plane that vanished years ago. In that moment, the forest held its breath. A long-buried secret was waking, one that would pull the little girl and her two loyal shepherds into a mystery darker than any summer night. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and tell us where you're watching from. Your support keeps these stories alive. Denver's Western Fringe always felt like a place where silence came with its own heartbeat. In midsummer, the land baked under relentless heat. Dry winds slid down from the foothills like sighs from an ancient world, lifting dust and pollen into the shimmering air. The sky stretched wide and unbroken, a sheet of blue so bright it made the streets and houses below seem smaller, quieter, as if the whole town were holding still beneath the weight of the season. At the edge of that heat-laden city sat Willow Creek, a tiny neighborhood of wooden porches, creaky screen doors, and wide lawns burnt golden by the sun. The afternoons smelled of pine resin, warm asphalt, and the faint sweetness of honeysuckle that climbed the fences like rebellious vines. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and where every porch light at night felt like a silent promise of safety. But safety wasn't something Emma Miller felt very much anymore. She was a 7-year-old American girl with bright blue eyes, sun-lightened hair pulled into an uneven ponytail, and a face softened by freckles. Her pastel pink jacket, far too warm for summer, hung loosely over her small frame, while her blue jeans and slightly oversized brown boots made her look like someone who was always ready for an adventure she didn't quite plan to have. Her mother had sent her here so she could have a peaceful summer, but peace didn't sit easily in Emma's heart, not since her father vanished with Flight 217 3 years ago. Her aunt, Margaret Lewis, was a tall woman in her early 40s, with silver-streaked brown hair tied into a firm bun and a face carved by both kindness and the quiet exhaustion of a single life lived responsibly. She wore simple cotton blouses and long skirts, preferring earthy colors. Her calm personality matched her soft voice, though the slight slump in her shoulders hinted at a woman who carried responsibilities alone for too long. She welcomed Emma with a warm but somewhat distracted smile. Margaret worked remotely for a forestry office and often spent hours poring over maps and old reports at the kitchen table. Fortunately for Emma, Willow Creek wasn't entirely lonely. She had two loyal companions, Max and Rex, her aunt's German shepherds. Max, 4 years old, was the larger of the two, big, muscular, with a golden tan coat and comically large paws. His face held a kind of innocent brightness, the expression of a dog who believed every moment was meant to be joyful. He was clumsy, constantly knocking into furniture or wagging his tail like a broom that sent things flying. Rex, on the other hand, was 3, a bit smaller, lean and sharp-eyed with a darker coat. His ears stood perfectly straight, his gaze constantly sweeping the surroundings. Unlike Max, Rex rarely acted silly. He moved with a purpose, as if protecting Emma was a mission he'd been born for. Together, they were a mismatched pair, one heart, one mind, shadowing Emma everywhere she roamed. The summer day blurred into evening. After a simple dinner of chicken and rice, Margaret absent-mindedly turned on the old television that sat in the corner of the living room. Static crackled before the screen displayed a faded documentary rerun about a string of aviation mysteries. Emma sat stiffly on the couch as a reporter mentioned Flight 217, the Denver to Seattle passenger plane that vanished without distress calls. One possible crash site had been listed near the mountains just north of Willow Creek. Emma's breath hitched. She said nothing, but her small fingers tightened around the fabric of her jacket. Margaret didn't notice. She had seen the program before. But Emma felt the hurt echo through her chest. Her father, David Miller, a broad-shouldered man with warm brown eyes and a gentle smile, had been aboard that flight. He was the kind who always knelt to talk to her at eye level, who smelled of laundry soap and peppermint gum, who once promised he'd teach her to read the stars so she'd never get lost. Now, every mention of the flight felt like another tug at a wound that hadn't healed. Later that night, unable to sleep, Emma slipped on her boots and tiptoed outside with Max and Rex trailing behind her. The air smelled of warm pine and dry grass. Crickets buzzed loudly as the three of them walked toward the edge of the forest behind the house. Above them, the sky glittered with stars, thick and bright like spilled salt across velvet. Emma held her old toy walkie-talkie, a battered pink thing with stickers peeling off its sides. It hadn't worked in months. Its circuits fried after she dropped it in a puddle last year. Still, she brought it everywhere, perhaps because it was the last thing her father ever repaired for her. Max chased fireflies in circles, occasionally sneezing when one brushed his nose. Rex remained tense, his ears turning at every distant rustle. Then, halfway through a clearing where the grass swayed in warm waves, the walkie-talkie crackled. At first it was just a faint hiss. Then came a strange, pulsing sound, sharp, steady, unnatural, psst, psst, Kurt, as though trying to form a message through the static. Emma froze. The device warmed in her hand. Max stopped mid-pounce, tilting his head. But Rex reacted violently. His entire body stiffened, one paw raised, ears locked forward. With a sudden growl, he grabbed the edge of Emma's jacket with his teeth and tugged her toward the tree line that opened into a small overlook facing the distant mountains. The night wind gusted, carrying with it something faint and eerie, a deep hum that rose and fell like the memory of an aircraft engine, even though the sky was clear and empty. Emma stepped forward, heart pounding. Max pressed against her leg. Rex stood rigid beside her, eyes sharp with instinctual alarm. In the stretch of darkness above the mountains, a thin streak of white light cut briefly across the stars, the kind of fleeting motion that left the mind wondering if it was real or imagined. And then the walkie-talkie beeped. Once, twice, then a rapid sequence. Beep, beep, beep. Perfectly spaced, perfectly clear, as if someone far away was calling her directly through the night. The next morning unfolded under a harsher sun, the kind that bleached the rooftops of Willow Creek and filled the air with the dry murmurs of cicadas. The temperature had already climbed past comfort, and the sky shimmered with heat waves rising off the asphalt roads. Emma Miller, her small face still shadowed by the unease of the night before, tried her best to look normal at breakfast. Her bright blue eyes darted away whenever Aunt Margaret asked if she had slept well. Margaret, busy preparing her thermos of iced coffee, didn't notice the way Emma's fingers fidgeted or how she kept glancing out the window toward the forest. Once her aunt settled at her desk to begin a long day of forestry paperwork, Emma seized her moment. She slipped on her pastel pink jacket, despite the heat, pulled on her brown boots, and grabbed a tiny blue backpack decorated with faded star stickers. Max and Rex, always attentive to her movements, rose instantly. Max wagged his tail so wildly it thumped against the wall like a soft drumbeat, while Rex simply stood tall and alert, head tilted, as if already decoding her intentions. Emma pressed a finger to her lips, signaling Max to stay quiet. An impossible request for the big tan shepherd. He let out a muffled whine of excitement before following her out the back door. Rex moved in silence, his dark coat almost blending with the shade of the porch. The moment they stepped into the forest, the world shifted. Sunlight streamed in sharp golden beams through the dense canopy above, and the summer air trembled with the chorus of cicadas hiding in the trees. Pine needles crunched beneath Emma's boots, and dry leaves rustled as Max darted after every drifting leaf like an oversized puppy. Rex, ever the disciplined one, nudged Max's shoulder with a stern growl whenever he got too rowdy, earning a half-hearted glare from his clumsy companion. Emma couldn't help a soft laugh, though her heart remained tight with anticipation. They followed the direction from last night, the way Rex had pulled her, the way the strange beeping had echoed through the walkie-talkie. The deeper they walked, the cooler the air became, shadows thickening around them despite the bright morning sun. After nearly 20 minutes weaving through thick brush and towering pines, the forest suddenly opened into a clearing. Emma stopped in her tracks. The clearing was circular, perfectly so, as though carved deliberately. The grass in the center was dry and brown, scorched as if exposed to intense heat. Around the edges, tall trees stood unnaturally straight, and the soil beneath them seemed recently disturbed. The scene gave off the unsettling feeling of a place that had once witnessed something heavy, something out of place. Max was the first to move into the clearing, nose twitching as he sniffed aggressively. His barks erupted in bursts, echoing against the trees. Rex braced forward with sharper purpose, sniffing one particular patch near the film, charred center. His paws dug into the dirt, flinging dry soil behind him as though he knew exactly what he was looking for. Emma crouched beside him. A metallic glint caught her eye. She brushed away more dirt until a curved piece of metal emerged from the earth, dented, scratched, and faintly embossed with a faded airline logo. The paint had peeled away, but the outline of 3 numbers lingered beneath the grime. She gasped, her breath catching in her throat. She recognized the style. It resembled the numbering format used on Flight 217. Nearby, Max pawed insistently at something half-buried under pine needles. Emma reached out and pulled forward a small, worn-out child's backpack. The fabric was dusty but dry, untouched by morning dew. Strange. She unzipped it and found a crumpled map of the forest tucked inside. A shaky red circle had been drawn at a location deep within the mountain ridge. Beneath the circle were 2 scribbled words: "Help us." Her hands trembled. The air around her felt suddenly colder despite the summer heat. She pulled out her toy walkie-talkie, hesitating only a second before flipping the switch. Instead of static or silence, the speaker delivered a series of short, precise tones. Beep, 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 beep. A simple Morse-like pattern repeating consistently. The signal was coming from the direction of the red circle on the map. Max stopped barking and pressed close to Emma's side, his ears flattening as he sensed the shift in her breathing. Rex, more poised, lifted his head sharply toward the mountains. His body stiffened, muscles tense beneath his dark fur. Just as Emma stood, clutching the backpack and metal fragment, the ground beneath them trembled. At first, it was so slight, she thought she imagined it. But then a deeper vibration rolled through the clearing, making the dust on the ground dance. Max growled with a low, uncertain rumble. Rex snapped his head toward the distant ridge, lips curling in a silent snarl. The walkie-talkie let out one final burst of frantic beeping, loud, urgent, insistent, before shutting off completely as if someone, somewhere, had cut the connection. The path beyond the scorched clearing twisted upward through thicker woods, where shafts of summer sunlight pierced the canopy like golden spears. The forest floor grew steeper, rougher, scattered with jagged stones and gnarled roots. Emma Miller pushed forward despite the heat pressing against her skin. Her pastel pink jacket clung awkwardly to her frame, and sweat gathered along her hairline, but she refused to turn back. Something in her small chest, a mix of instinct, fear, and the stubborn spark she inherited from her father, told her the answers were ahead. Max trotted in front, his tan coat shimmering beneath the sun. He was 4 years old, but acted like a giant puppy, his paws too big, his movements uncoordinated. Every few steps he stumbled over a stone or root, only to bounce back up with his tail wagging furiously as though the forest itself had challenged him to a game. Rex remained close to Emma, the darker and smaller of the two German shepherds. 3 years old, lean, alert, with a black saddle marking across his back, Rex scanned everything, the treetops, the corners, the shadows, as though expecting danger around each turn. His ears flicked at the softest rustle, and his steps were precise, purposeful, reminiscent of a soldier trained for vigilance rather than play. Emma clutched the map she found inside the old backpack. The red circle stared back at her like an unblinking warning. The scribbled "Help us" still echoed in her mind, each letter heavy with fear. She tightened her grip on the walkie-talkie strapped to the side of her tiny blue backpack. It had remained silent since cutting out in the clearing, but its weight felt like a connection to something, or someone, calling from a place she didn't yet understand. They moved toward a narrow gorge marked on the map. The rocks here rose like jagged gray walls, covered in wild vines and patches of moss. The air cooled inside the gorge, and the sunlight filtered in as thin beams catching drifting motes of dust. Max bounded ahead enthusiastically until the ground narrowed into a single file path. His enthusiasm faded as the footing became trickier. He slipped twice, scrambling noisily, prompting a sharp reprimand growl from Rex. Emma reached out to steady Max, laughing weakly at his clumsy pride, though underneath the laughter her heart beat with nervous anticipation. The gorge widened at the end into a small natural alcove where the rock face looked strangely unnatural. Emma stopped, squinting. Beneath the climbing vines and layers of dust, the stone wasn't stone. It was too smooth, too perfectly flat. Rex lowered his head, sniffed, then let out a sharp, urgent bark that reverberated between the walls. Max stepped back, whining softly. Emma approached the vine-covered surface and brushed a hand across it. The texture beneath the leaves was cold, metallic, and unmistakably artificial. Her movements stirred something in the vines, causing strands to peel away and reveal a faint line, straight, symmetrical, running vertically down the surface. A doorway. A huge one. Emma's breath caught. Rex placed his paws against the vines and clawed steadily, helping tear them down. Max, suddenly eager again, used his considerable weight to shove and paw until dried vines dropped in clumps to the ground. A massive concrete door emerged, framed with metal edges dulled by time. Faded symbols were etched on the right, warning signs worn by age almost erased. Beneath the grime, a battered keypad protruded from the wall. Its buttons were dusty but intact. Emma's heart pounded. On the map, beside the red circle, the same string of numbers from the metal fragment were scribbled in the corner. She stepped onto her toes and punched them into the keypad. For a moment, the forest held its breath. The cicadas ceased their hum, and even Max and Rex fell silent. Then a deep mechanical groan rolled through the rock walls. The door vibrated. Metal gears inside churned with slow, bone-shaking rhythm. Dust rained down as ancient machinery came alive, belching cold air through cracks along the frame. Max jumped backward in alarm, tail tucked, before barking at the door as if challenging it to a duel. Rex lowered himself into a defensive stance beside Emma, shielding her with his body. The concrete slab pulled inward with excruciating slowness. Behind it, a cloud of cool, stale air swept out, smelling of engine oil, rusted steel, and buried secrets. Emma coughed lightly, but forced herself to peer into the widening gap. Darkness stretched inside like a tunnel into another world. A faint metallic clink echoed, like something shifting far below. She took a tentative step forward, the toes of her boots touching the threshold. Her eyes adjusted gradually to the dimness. Shapes emerged from the darkness. Tall metal beams, dangling wires, and pipes that traced the walls like veins. The chamber beyond was immense, carved deep beneath the mountain. Max crept behind her, pressing his warm body against her legs, while Rex crossed the threshold first, nose low, tail straight, every muscle coiled like a guardian ready for whatever lay inside. Emma followed closely, her small silhouette swallowed by the cavernous hall. Their footsteps echoed softly, the only sound in the vast, cold air. Then, far ahead, something massive caught the faint spill of light from the opening door. A curved structure, smooth, metallic, rested in the center of the chamber. Emma blinked, heart quickening. She moved closer, her breath forming a small mist from the sudden drop in temperature. The vast shape loomed larger, its surface reflecting the faint glow of leftover emergency strips along the walls. And then she recognized it. The unmistakable arc of a nose cone. A passenger aircraft, hidden underground. Silent. Waiting. A small light near its front flickered once. A single brief pulse, like an eye opening. As if someone or something had just noticed her arrival, the cavern swallowed sound as Emma stepped deeper into the underground hangar, her breath forming faint clouds in the cold air. The huge shape before her slowly revealed itself as her eyes adjusted. A full-sized passenger jet, its silver fuselage dulled by years of dust, but still eerily intact. The emergency lights along the walls flickered weakly, casting a ghostly shimmer across the metal body. Max crept forward with hesitant curiosity, sniffing loudly at the base of the landing gear. His tan fur bristled slightly, not from fear exactly, but from confusion at encountering something so massive in a place so unnatural. Rex moved with more precision, tracing the length of the fuselage with disciplined steps, stopping at dents and scratches like a seasoned inspector. His dark coat blended with the shadows, and every so often his ears twitched at distant mechanical groans that echoed through the hollow chamber. Emma approached the plane slowly, her small boots tapping lightly against the concrete floor. When she reached the passenger door, left slightly ajar as if someone had last exited in a hurry. She hesitated only a moment before pushing it open. The hinges squealed faintly, and a wave of cold, stale air washed over her. She stepped inside. The cabin, though layered with dust, felt frozen in time. Rows of seats filled the narrow path, some upright, some reclined, but all intact. Oxygen masks hung loosely from a few compartments, and scattered papers littered the aisle. Emma picked up one scrap, a child's drawing of a blue sky and a mountain, signed only with a shaky Liam. Another showed stick figures holding hands beside a plane. Many had dates scribbled on them, stretching months beyond the day Flight 217 had disappeared. They hadn't died. They had lived here, at least for a while. Emma's small chest tightened. Max wandered in behind her, tail swaying with a soft thump against seats as he sniffed along the aisle, sending dust swirling in little clouds. Rex padded past him, jumping onto a row of seats to peer out the window, alert but quiet. The cockpit door hung crookedly, its lock broken. Emma pushed it open and stepped into the narrow space. The panels were covered with dust, but the pilot and co-pilot seats remained intact. On one of the consoles lay a weather-beaten notebook with pages sticking out at odd angles. She picked it up. Her hands trembled. The moment she opened the first page, she froze. The handwriting, slanted, careful, familiar, belonged to her father, David Miller. David Miller had been a man in his mid-30s when he boarded the flight. He had warm brown eyes, a strong jaw softened by faint laugh lines, and dark blonde hair he usually combed backward with hurried fingers. A high school science teacher by profession, he loved observing the world and explaining it in ways that made even the smallest things feel magical. Losing him had carved a quiet ache into Emma's world, an ache she had learned to live with but never truly understood. Seeing his handwriting here felt like hearing his voice again. The entries described the emergency landing forced by an anonymous radio command, the loss of all external communication, and the growing fear among passengers. David wrote of keeping spirits up, of rationing supplies, of using kindness like a bandage for panic. He listed dates, dozens of them, proving the passengers survived long after authorities declared them lost. Toward the end, the tone changed. The final pages mentioned a hidden exit built into the mountainside and a valley beyond where he believed safety waited. His last line made Emma's throat tighten. "If anyone finds this, bring us home." Rex nudged her gently, sensing the shift in her breathing. Max, meanwhile, proudly paraded around the cockpit with a neon safety vest he had found wedged under a seat, shaking it like a trophy. Rex growled in annoyance, trying to tug it away, while Emma wiped her eyes and managed a small, broken laugh at their ridiculous moment of normalcy. But then the hum of the room changed. A faint metallic clatter echoed from above, followed by slow, heavy footsteps on the platform leading into the hangar. The light spilling from the open door dimmed, blocked by a silhouette. Emma stiffened. The massive concrete door that had granted them entry hours earlier began to rumble. Its machinery groaned angrily, and dust cascaded from the seams as it started to slide shut again. The shadows thickened as the entrance narrowed. Max barked frantically. Rex bolted toward the exit, body taut with warning. Emma clutched the notebook against her chest and ran, her boots clacking against the concrete as the chamber filled with the grinding echoes of the closing door. Just as they neared the shrinking strip of daylight, a tall figure stepped forward, blocking the threshold. Emma skidded to a stop. The man was broad-shouldered and imposing, dressed in dusty work clothes, a heavy canvas jacket, dirt-streaked jeans, and worn boots. He looked to be in his late 50s, with a sun-weathered face, deep wrinkles carved around his mouth, and a salt and pepper beard cropped short against his sharp jawline. His eyes were pale gray, cold and unreadable, as if they had seen far more than any person should. A scar ran down his left temple, disappearing into his beard, giving him a hardened, almost haunted look. He smelled faintly of metal and earth, like someone who belonged underground more than above it. His voice rumbled out, deep and gravelly, a sound shaped by years of isolation. "You shouldn't have seen any of this." Max stepped in front of Emma, hackles raised, growling low. Rex moved to flank her other side, poised like a soldier ready for the first command. The man didn't flinch. He simply stared, a strange mix of regret and warning tightening his expression. The door continued to close behind him, its shadow swallowing the last of the warm daylight. The man blocking the shrinking doorway did not move at first, his silhouette carved sharply against the cold, mechanical glow of the underground hangar. Emma froze, clutching her father's notebook so tightly her knuckles turned white. Max and Rex positioned themselves like living shields, one on each side of her tiny frame. A draft of cold air swept past them as the concrete door continued closing behind the man, groaning with metallic exhaustion. Then the figure stepped forward into the dim light. He was older than Emma had expected, perhaps in his late 60s, with a weather-worn face and deep creases etched across his forehead. His beard, once black, was now thick and silvered, trimmed unevenly as if with tools not made for grooming. His hair, also streaked with gray, was long enough to brush his collar and looked heavy with dust and grease. His skin was sun-tanned, though dulled by years spent underground. Most striking were his eyes, pale hazel rimmed red from sleeplessness, carrying the weight of years of regret. He wore a faded mechanic's jumpsuit, torn at the elbows, stained with oil and dirt. He stood tall despite a slight limp, favoring his right leg. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked, not with anger, but with exhaustion. "I didn't want anyone to come here, not anymore." Emma didn't back away. She lifted the notebook toward him with trembling hands. "Did you know my dad?" A long moment passed. The man's jaw tightened. He slowly reached out and touched the notebook with rough, calloused fingers. For a heartbeat, he closed his eyes, as though the simple contact awakened memories buried too deeply. "My name is Walter Grady," he said quietly. "I was the senior mechanic on board 217. Emma blinked. Max stopped growling. Rex tilted his head but did not let his guard down. Walter continued, his voice growing steadier. "When the order came to divert and land here, we obeyed. We were told it was a temporary detour, but then communication was cut. Guards left us supplies for 6 months, then never came back." His shoulders slumped. "I stayed behind when the others escaped. Someone needed to watch the plane, to make sure it didn't get buried forever." Emma stepped closer. At 7 years old, she barely reached his waist, but her voice was stronger than he expected. "They didn't die, did they?" He shook his head. "No, not all. They followed a hidden exit toward a valley deep in the mountains. Your father helped lead them." He swallowed hard. "But I was too afraid to go. I thought the ones who ordered this might return. I thought they'd punish us if we left." Guilt clung to him like a shadow, bending his back. Emma opened the notebook to the last page. "He said someone would come, someone who could bring them home." Walter stared at her with a trembling breath. Then he nodded, slowly, heavily, like a man breaking free of chains he had worn too long. Without another word, he turned toward a dusty control panel near the hangar wall. His fingers moved uncertainly, as if relearning a language he once knew. The old equipment sputtered, vibrated, and then crackled to life with static. A small green light blinked, something that hadn't blinked in years. Walter set the radio frequency with care. A piercing signal transmitted into the sky. Coordinates followed, numbers Emma recognized from her father's notes. The call for help was finally sent. Miles away, in the Denver Emergency Operations Center, a technician named Maria Hernandez, young, alert, wide-eyed behind thick, round glasses, picked up the strange signal. She was in her 20s, with curly dark hair pulled into a bun and a habit of tapping her pencil against her teeth when anxious. Her station received countless false alarms, but this one was precise, urgent, encoded with an aviation distress signature long retired. Her sharp instincts, honed from a life of working harder than those around her, told her this wasn't a prank. "Dispatch, we have an anomaly on a legacy channel," she said, voice tight. "Tracking coordinates now." Within minutes, helicopters and rescue teams were mobilized. Back in the mountains, Walter opened a hidden exit at the back of the hangar. Sunlight rushed in, warm and golden. Emma shielded her eyes. Max panted excitedly. Rex sniffed the air as if already plotting the safest path. Together, with Walter following behind like a weary guardian, they began the trek toward the valley. The journey was long, steep slopes, tangled brush, and the relentless summer sun beating down. But Emma led without complaint, guided by her father's words and the unwavering loyalty of her 2 German shepherds. At last, they reached the hidden valley, a lush green cradle between cliffs, where small wooden cabins dotted the landscape. People emerged slowly from doorways and shaded porches. Older men with weathered faces, women with sun-lined eyes, teenagers who had grown up here, and younger children who knew no other world. Gasps echoed across the valley as they recognized the notebook in Emma's hands, and recognized something in her eyes. Then a voice rose above the murmurs. "Emma?" She spun around. A man stepped forward, broad-shouldered, hair now graying at the temples, beard unshaven, clothes simple and patched. But Emma knew the eyes, warm brown, gentle, alive. "Daddy!" She ran to him. He caught her in his arms, lifting her with a sob of disbelief. Max and Rex circled them, barking triumphantly, as if announcing the miracle to the whole valley. Tears streamed down the faces of survivors who had thought rescue would never come. Later, the world would learn the truth. Records would be corrected, officials would apologize, and a little girl in a pastel pink jacket, along with 2 German shepherds, would be named heroes for uncovering the final trail. That night, on the balcony of her aunt's house, Emma looked toward the Shaoxing Mountains. The wind whispered through the treetops, carrying a faint metallic ting, like an airplane seatbelt chime. She smiled, hugging Max and Rex tightly. "We did it," she murmured. The dogs wagged their tails, pleased, as if saving lost souls was simply their duty. Sometimes, in the quiet corners of our lives, miracles don't arrive with thunder or lightning. They come in the form of a little girl in a pink jacket, or in the steady paws of 2 loyal German shepherds, or in a signal that somehow survives years of silence. And sometimes, God chooses the smallest, most unlikely hands to carry the greatest light. Emma's journey reminds us that no matter how lost we feel, no matter how long the darkness lasts, there is always a path home waiting to be found. Faith has a way of guiding us through mountains we don't yet understand, and God often sends helpers we never expected. Just as he watched over a father praying to be reunited with his daughter, just as he placed courage in the heart of a 7-year-old child, he also watches over each of us as we face our own valleys, dangers, and unanswered questions. May this story remind you that hope is never gone. Miracles are never out of reach, and God's protection can arrive in the most surprising forms. If this story moved your heart, please share it. Leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel so more people can find strength in moments like these. And may God bless you, protect your family, and walk beside you in every chapter of your own story.